Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea from Game Informer, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. Since we are right at the end of the year, it is about that time. It's the second annual eShop Gems of the Year episode, and since we're talking indies and gems, I had to bring back the master of that world. It's former Game Informer editor and current Indie Informer, Jill Grodt. Jill, how have you been? Welcome back to All Things Nintendo.
Thank you so much for having me back and for the amazing title. No one's called me the master of the realm yet.
I mean, you're the master of indies. When I know that I have like an indie-focused episode, I know I gotta hit you up.
I really appreciate it. I have a lot of fun doing these, and I am going to attempt not to make the podcast go too long, but you know, I might wax poetic on a few of these that I love very much. But to answer your question, I'm doing great. I'm having a great time. I am running the Indie Informer, which, you know, name might sound familiar for reasons, but it's been great. Everything's been going really well. I've got things going on, reviews everybody should check out, getting to do what I love and share indies with everybody. So go check it out.
That has long been your passion, and like you had indicated, you left Game Informer back in July of this year.
Yes.
And you haven't been back on All Things Nintendo since, but you've been running this website, Indie Informer.
Yes.
And by all indications, you're having a great time doing it. You're getting to do your passion, which you always loved at Game Informer, which was highlighting these indies, pushing them forward. I found out about so many amazing indie games through you. And I'm hoping that this episode will allow other people to find out some of the games maybe they missed over the course of 2022.
Yeah,
so I'm excited to dive in with you. And you mentioned like, you're going to try not to make this episode too long. I don't think that's going to be possible given the list that we have. So we'll get into that in a second. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Next week, we will be ending the year with another second annual, and that is the second annual year-end award show. And the reason that we're doing this episode is before that is because indie games, I think, too often get lost in the shuffle of shows like that. So I wanted to give them their own dedicated episode, kind of like I've had to like try to give them a dedicated segment in most episodes of All Things Nintendo. So we have a list of nearly 40 games. Last year, it was nearly 20 games, and we went pretty long. So this year, it might be a little bit longer. So we're not going to dwell on any of these games for too long because, quite frankly, the record for longest episode so far of All Things Nintendo, I think, is like 2 hours and 25 minutes. And that was like a multi-segment, like Nintendo Direct and like reviews and all this other stuff. So I would like us not to top that, but I do want to touch on what makes each game on this list so cool. So hopefully we can help find listeners of this show, help them find a new game that they really love. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't really find a better way to go with this than chronologically because we're not really ranking our favorites on this part.
Right.
And so
that would be a task.
Oh my God. Yeah. So we're rather than that, we're just going to try to give some flowers to our favorite indies and lesser known games of the year that came to Switch. So the rules are basically like, even if a game came out last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, if it came to Switch in 2022 calendar year, it is going to be something that we want to highlight or is eligible to be highlighted on this list. Mm-hmm. So in that spirit, the first game on my list is The Artful Escape, which came to Switch on January 25th. It came to other platforms last year.
Yeah.
But I think you liked this game a lot, didn't you?
I did indeed. I did the review for this game. It is not a mechanically challenging game, but what it does so beautifully is to put you in the world, put you into the story. It is so spectacular to look at. It makes you feel cool. Like some of the only things you can do is just like jump and slide and play your guitar, and doing those things just feels really amazing, like you are some kind of big star. So that's why I would tell people to play this if you just want a game that's not particularly going to challenge you but is going to make you feel things. This is the game for you.
Yeah, it's a game that it's very focused on music, like you'd indicated. Like one of like 3 actions you can do is just wail on your electric guitar, and it makes the feeling of that. It's not like a Guitar Hero type game or anything where you have to like do like any beat matching.
It's not
or anything.
A rhythm game. No.
Correct. But it makes you feel good about playing that guitar, and the story's kind of centered around that. And it's visually striking. Obviously, the audio is great in a game like that.
Yeah.
But anything else we need to say about this game?
It is a touching story. The main character, Francis something, I can't remember his last name now, is a folk music kind of legacy. His uncle, I believe, is this big folk music person, and he wants to play like David Bowie type 80s rock. And he's finding himself. It's a game about finding himself and accepting who he is, and just a really lot of fun.
And if you're interested in The Artful Escape, it is $20. So that's a running theme with a lot of these games. It's not a giant monetary investment for a lot of these games. So
Yeah.
keep that in mind. I'm going to try to give the prices for all the games as we go. I did look them up on the eShop earlier this morning, so that way if something catches your ear or your eye or whatever terminology we're going to use here, we can you can know what you're getting into, and you're not going to have like any kind of sticker shock when you go to the eShop to check the game's page out. So next up is a game that I actually haven't played. I've played the games that came before it, but I've not played this game in particular. I bought it the day it came out, and I just got so busy with other games I didn't have a chance to check it out. It's a game by Roll7. It is Ollie Ollie World.
Woo!
And that came out February 8th, and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's also one of those games that I touched and sort of unfortunately had other things to do at the time. And I need to go back, but the list of things that I need to go back to play is so large.
Oh, it's
But
unbelievable.
yeah, it is. If you don't know what Ollie Ollie World is, it is this sort of skating game that lets you do tricks and combos and get through missions in the world. One of the most striking things about it is that it has this beautiful kind of 2D style, almost minimalistic, and it's got a story, and it's kind of a wacky sort of the gods of skating have plans for you, and you were following those plans, and it's charming, and it's goofy, and it's over the top, and it does have some challenge to it. I From what I understand, because I'm not that huge into the series, but this game is a little more accessible than the first couple.
Oh yeah, the first two were very fun, but
Yeah.
they ratchet up the difficulty so fast. It's a sharp learning curve in those first two games. And they also have minimal story in those first two games, whereas this one is very heavy in the story front.
Yes.
And the first two games, like, the most fantastical thing you really got was like, all right, you're going to have some very unrealistic skating obstacle courses, but this one, like, the whole world is unrealistic and like kind of whimsical and goofy and fantastical.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at a picture right now, and you've got like a desert with like a dead giant narwhal just in the background. So that's sort of what you're thinking of when you're playing this game. And it should have won Best Sports for the Game Awards. That's all I'm saying.
Wow, that's high praise, especially when we're going to have a Best Sports category next week on all things Nintendo. So you've cast your vote.
Yeah, I cast my vote, and I hope that everybody listens very carefully to it.
Well, that game is $30, and I know Blake Hester, who reviewed it for us, liked it a good deal as well. Going on to another sports game, which I actually would say is a strong contender for Sports Game of the Year. It's a game called Retro Bowl. Have you heard of this?
I don't think so. I need to check this out.
So
go ahead.
It's been on mobile for a while, from what I understand, but I first heard of it perusing some Nintendo websites. They're like, oh yeah, there's this game called Retro Bowl coming out. It's like a kind of like an indie homage to Tecmo Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like a side view of a football field, and it's like NES style graphics, maybe like in between 8 and 16-bit almost.
Yeah, those are chunky pixels.
Yes, and and it's $5. That's one of the main selling. That's what I was like. I don't care like if it's not that good or not that in depth. It is $5. So I picked it up, and I just like started playing it. This came out February 10th on Switch, by the way, and I'm having a really good time. I expected it to be like, all right, you can play like single games and everything, but no, it's a career mode, and that's it.
Huh.
So you start off, you create your, all you do is you name your coach, right? And you're the head coach basically, and you manage the team. So it's almost like a management sim, but then you play on offense. You play every game on, or yeah, every game on offense, and you can manage your players. They all have like egos, and they have like morale. So like if you're losing a lot, like maybe your star quarterback's going to start getting unhappy, and that'll start causing like performance problems. And then like there's trades and free agency, and like you can even like, here's one thing I really love. Back in the day when it was like retro sports games, like I'm talking like old games, like early Genesis, like maybe even like there was a game called Tony La Russa Baseball on PC that I loved, on DOS, and you could edit all the players' names. So I could have like up to date rosters, and just like editing all like the players to however like they actually are in real life. You can edit all the players' names on
Oh,
this, which is
perfect.
something that I love, because and it's not like a huge time investment, because you can only edit the team that you're currently controlling. So like they're fake teams, like they're just city names, but all the cities and team colors match up with like NFL. So
Mhm.
like I put my favorite team's Baltimore because I'm a Ravens fan, and like sure enough, I go into that team and it's like they're purple and black, and like they look like the Ravens, and but all the player names are fake. There's no actual reference to like Ravens, and then it's like, do you want to start as like playing as your favorite team? And I said, yeah. And it was like, that makes it, it gave me like a little message. It's basically like, it kind of makes it like the story less interesting. If like you're not, you should start with like a worse team. So they put me on the basically the New York Jets is
Oh
like the team that
no.
I got put on. And so I went in and like edited all the 12 players that you can edit. And yeah, it's fun, and I'm having a really great time with it. It's again $5. I just one play session alone, I think I got $5 worth of entertainment value, and I highly recommend it for people who missed like kind of like the NES, SNES style football games before like Madden became like the gold standard for games back in like the late 90s.
Sounds like something to pick up.
Yeah, and again, $5.
Woo!
So next up on the list, we're going to jump all the way to early March, March 1st. Far Changing Tides. Do you know anything about
Mm.
this game?
I do. It is a sequel. I don't know if it's a direct sequel. It
From
might be,
Lone
but
Sales,
it
right?
is Lone Sales. Yes. And I did play a little bit of this, and it is like Lone Sales. You are in a vessel. This time you're on water, and you are sailing through. It has. I mean, first of all, it's just gorgeous to look at. You are in sort of a like post-apocalyptic sort of situation. You're
Mm-hmm.
not in normal world, and as you're sailing, you kind of run into um, blockades and things that stop you, and you have to sort of do some environmental puzzles. And while you're going, you have to keep your kind of ship managed so you don't run out of fuel and things don't go on fire, and all of this kind of jazz. But there is overarching a kind of larger, deeper story, which I would love to dig into a little bit more. But it is something that is, if you are a person who enjoys narrative that's not really overt and in your face, but also gives you a little bit of room for interpretation and feels uh, deep and meaningful, then Far Changing Tides is going to be your thing. It's also it is not a fast-paced game. Um,
No.
so if you have patience, if you're kind of the person who enjoys watching the kind of meditative slow movement and progress, then that's kind of what you're looking at here. It's not a game that's frenzied in any way, but it is going to make you think by the end of it.
And I had a good time with what I played of this. I got kind of like Limbo or Inside style vibes.
Yeah.
Maybe not with the story necessarily, at least not what I've experienced so far, but with the gameplay and like the puzzle solving and everything like that.
Hmm.
But that's $20, and I think that it's a pretty fun game. I don't know how long it is, but I really enjoyed what I played of it. Next is a game that I have actually not played at all. It came out on Stadia last year, and it came to Switch March 10th. It is Young Souls.
Ooh.
Now,
Um,
what? Tell me about this game, because I've heard
yeah.
good things.
I have actually really funny memories of this game originally when it came to Stadia, because the wonderfully talented Marcus Stewart was doing the review for it.
Mm-hmm.
And Young Souls has a 2-player element to it that he wanted to check out. So I was actually brought on to help be the backup and second player. So I played a little bit of it. But unfortunately, we couldn't get Stadia to work with 2 people for some reason. So that's one of my big memories of Young Souls, is trying to play with Marcus Stewart and being frustrated and having a fun time just talking about it. But the basic game is you have the main characters are twins, and their adopted father figure is kidnapped. He mysteriously vanishes. So you're going out into the world to like fight like orcs and monsters and things, to go and find him and figure out what's happening. The game itself, the gameplay is fast paced and fun, and the tone of the game also is kind of this like, it's humorous but not too over the top or cringy, and just a kind of fun experience to be in. It visually, it's got a very striking art style with like purples and blues and like kind of uh, not quite minimalistic, but it is on that sort of like more, I think of like 80s kind of style, where you, if you want to, you could have another person playing with you, playing your twin, but otherwise you are controlling them and going through different combat scenarios and trying to save like I believe he's a wizard, if I remember correctly. It's like your wizard father figure who, you have some issues with because you are adopted, and have those sorts of, it has those themes running throughout as well. So it's got some interesting themes underneath.
Yeah, I'm reading stuff about like you're finding a hidden cellar in the Moongate portal and transports you to a dangerous parallel world where goblins thrive, and
Yes.
that's the kind of vibe you're getting from this game. It's also one of the few games on this list that made me enter an age verification when I tried to go to the eShop page, because I guess drug references, fantasy violence, and some other elements make it an M-rated game.
Wow, I didn't know it went up to M-rated, but
I didn't know either. Like I was expecting it to be like teen at most, but no,
yes.
this is an M-rated game. So
There you go. You're warned.
So that one's $25 if that sounds up your alley. And again, I've heard really good things about that. I just haven't had a chance. Another one I haven't had a chance to play, and I'm hoping you have because I've heard good things about this, is Kraken Academy.
Yeah, I think that Marcus is a huge fan of this game, if I recall correctly.
That's probably why I have it on this list, despite having not played it, because it's one of those games that he has talked up so much.
Yeah, I have played a demo of it, the early demo, and it is a kind of wacky, sort of Hogwarts idea. You are going to a school for differently abled people who have powers, and you're talking to like tree people and Pokemons and that sort of thing. And you go to class and uh, make friends, but on the side, you are tasked with saving the world, is like you do.
Of course.
Yeah, and it is, the tone of it is very very anime. It's like, I think one of my notes on this was like, it's just anime AF. But I, in particular, this is not, it seems like it should be my kind of game, but I didn't have like a huge response to it. So I haven't gone back to play anymore as it's been released. But if that sounds like the kind of game that's up your alley, like it is a well-made game. I had no problems with the development of it, and it seemed like there were some really interesting threads that you had to follow afterwards. And yeah, it seems 100%, if that is something that sounds like something you would like, then you should check it out.
And it came out March 22nd, and it costs $18. Yeah, I wish I had more to contribute to this conversation, but this is just one that I completely missed out on. I just saw it on our list and like the games that came out this year, and I knew Marcus loved it, and I was just like, all right, well, we should include it then. Here's one that I know we've featured on eShop Gems of the Week in the past, but it sounds like people kind of were all about this, but it got lost in the shuffle of like the Elden Ring explosion.
Yeah.
And that is Nobody Saves the World.
Yeah.
So talk to me about this.
Nobody Saves the World is you play as sort of nobody, which is a hilarious concept. The game is humor based, so a lot of jokes and silly humor and wacky things are happening. You take on different forms because you are nobody. You wake up in a hut somewhere, you have no idea who you are. You're just this kind of white, blobby humanoid figure. And trying to figure out what's going on, you wander into a wizard's tower who the wizard is now missing, and their associate is like, I'm going to find out where he is. And you pick up the wizard's wand, which has fallen apparently while he's been kidnapped, and it allows you the powers to transform, which is lucky because having picked this up, you're immediately suspected of being involved and you get thrown into jail, and then you can turn
Game
into
over.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Roll credits.
And then you find out you can turn into a rat and get through the dungeon and everything. And each different form has different abilities, and it helps you fight your way through different scenarios. And each ability has or each form has a kind of grade, and you start out with F. And as you use your form and you complete different challenges, you get higher and higher grades. And as your grade gets closer to A, you branch off and you have the ability to try a new form and to upgrade that one. And that allows you to get through different places that you couldn't get to before and fight different enemies. And the combination of uh, using different forms through dungeons and using different abilities, you can start to give abilities from one form to another form, so you can mix and match. And it is just a lot of very silly, kind of fantasy-esque dungeon crawling uh, action adventure game.
And it's, I think, one of the most acclaimed and talked about indies of 2022, to be quite honest. And
Yeah.
it's by Drinkbox, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so the studio that did like Severed and Guacamelee.
Yeah.
So that very good studio. And it's $25. Came out April 14th. And Jill, I mentioned that we were going to have some games that came out on other platforms earlier. And I think this is one of the ones that's most synonymous with another platform, but it came to Switch this year.
Yep.
Came out April 28th, and that is Bug Snacks.
Ooh.
Which I think was very much tied to like the PlayStation 5 when the PS5 was launching in 2020.
It was a launch title.
Yeah, and like it was very much a part of that marketing campaign. Like I feel like every time PlayStation had like a state of play or like an event surrounding its like lead up to launch, Bug Snacks had something around it. But now it's on Switch.
Yay, congratulations. I mean, that's great. I didn't know that it came to Switch this year, actually. It is Bug Snacks is such a great game and people should check it out. It is essentially a sort of Pokemon-esque game, but every character looks like a Muppet. And they just had a big DLC too, so you should definitely get this.
Big Snacks, right?
Yeah, the Isle of Big Snacks.
Isle of Big Snacks. Well, yeah, it's like Pokemon, but you're going around, instead of catching Pokemon, you're eating bugs.
Yeah, but the bugs are snacks.
Yes.
So, everybody lives on this kind of mysterious, or there's been an expedition to this mysterious place that is the home of the Bug Snacks, and they are a kind of semi-mythical creature that, when eaten, are the most delicious things you've ever had in your life. And so when you catch them, there are things like giant hamburgers that run around and that look kind of like, they all sort of look like bugs and like snacks. So when you catch one and you feed it to someone who is an NPC, like a part of them will transform. So like if they eat a burger, their arm might turn into a French fry, or their head might turn into a burger, you know.
Well, I just came from a fast food restaurant and I had a burger, so I really hope that I'm glad that this is not a real life thing. Like I've always said that like I wish Pokemon, like when I was a kid, I wanted Pokemon to be real.
Yeah, and then you
And
realize how terrible that would be.
then I realized that like Beedrill would just kill thousands of people every
Uh-huh.
year. And this sounds like a horror show every single
Yes.
time. Like if you thought of like this in real life application.
Here's the thing though. They actually lean very hard into that horror aspect. You don't expect it from the very colorful sort of Muppety like graphics,
Mm-hmm.
but as you go along, you are more and more sort of confronted with the realities of what you are doing and what
Oh
that
no.
means. Yeah. So the game actually gets really dark. um and the game is really LGBT plus friendly, which is another thing I wasn't expecting, which is really cool. So
Mm.
there are a lot of things that deal with, you know, being yourself and figuring out who you are and accepting things. And there are also a lot of just very silly, like, go and catch that bug that looks like a bunch of rice balls, you know? So a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, and that is again, people really had a good time with it when it came to PlayStation. I feel like it was kind of a quiet launch, but it hit Switch on April 28th, and I don't think a lot of people really followed that it was coming out on Switch. And if you're interested in Bug Snacks, it is $25. Next up is one that it's among the cheapest games on this list. It's one that actually former Game Informer editor in chief Andrew Reiner turned, I think, everybody onto. It put it on everybody's radar. I
Mhm.
think I was one of the few people that actually checked it out. It's very different from Bug Snacks, I would say, but equally as horrific.
Yeah.
And that is Ravenous Devils. And it is you want to talk about mature rated games. This came out on April 29th, and basically it feels like a video game adaptation of Sweeney Todd, the
Mhm.
musical, but there's no music and it's not like officially licensed. So instead of it being a barbershop that is creating this meat for this bakery, it is a tailor. So they took very little creative license in that regard. But like basically your job is it's a point and click style, like you have to kind of guide your characters along to like make sure that they are running this butcher operation that where like one of them's the tailor, one of them is the butcher in the basement, and you have to kind of like, all right, well, you killed this guy and threw him down the chute, and now you can make these meat pies with his meat and sell them to the people. And it's very, very demented, hence the name
Mhm.
Ravenous Devils. And there are some very disturbing things in there, so don't take that mature rating lightly, because like don't be like, oh well, my kid's fine, he'll play this game and have a great time. uh
No.
there's some pretty disturbing stuff in here, I will say that. So if you can stomach that type of stuff and like you happen to enjoy like things like Sweeney Todd, maybe this is one that's worth checking out. But yes, just buyer beware. However, it's in the $5 club. So
Woo.
if that kind of tips you off to maybe going in that direction, came out April 29th, and $5. So you could do a lot worse than that. I mean, I know I'm sipping on a coffee right now that cost me a couple bucks more than that.
I Speaking of Sweeney Todd, you've just rung my memory bell there. If you don't want to go that mature, you could check out Godlike Burger. That came to Switch this year as well, and it is Sweeney Todd but in space and with aliens and sort of Sweeney Todd overcooked sort of vibes.
I
So
have
maybe
never heard of that, and
it's
it
really
sounds
fun.
amazing.
It is so good. Check
I
it
love
out.
Overcooked.
So yeah, it's just you are a singular person. You are trying to fulfill orders for your alien clientele, um, but you could either feed them or kill them to make them into burgers.
Okay.
But you can't get caught doing it. It's a lot of very silly fun.
Interesting. So here's the next one that I unfortunately have not had a chance to check out, but is very critically acclaimed, and that is Citizen Sleeper. This
Oh my
came
god.
out May 5th. But Jill, tell me all about Citizen Sleeper.
Citizen Sleeper is something everyone should check out. Like, it's something that I unfortunately put off for a long time because it is very sci-fi, and that's usually not my genre. But it is so incredibly like it is an unbelievable experience. What you are doing is um you are experiencing, I mean, it's essentially a text-based game, that has table RPG elements. So you are uh reading a chunk of text, and then you have things that you can do to sort of like, okay, let me go back. You are playing a sort of android-ish being.
Mm-hmm.
Your knowledge and intellect and psyche has been put into a uh, synthetic body, and you were currently working for a company who makes the body, but you wanted to escape, and you escaped that life, and you are now living on a space station, um, and trying to keep your synthetic body alive because the company considers you property and you have stolen that property. And in order to keep people from escaping, they make it so that the body starts to deteriorate if not given the correct medicines. um, so you have to live your life, trying to live a whole new life in with freedom and making friends, and just going about your day and trying to make a living wage and eat and survive. Uh, but you are dying throughout. So the the things they were trying to do are like, I am going to sneak into a shipyard and start just pretending to help someone so that they think that I've been here the whole time. And then you roll to see if you're successful. And your ability to roll is tied to how uh, overall well you are doing. So if you're keeping your body from deteriorating, you have more dice and you have more chances to do that successfully. Um, but in order to keep your body from dying, you have to find somewhere on this ring like spaceship a doctor who is willing to treat you, knowing that you are essentially
Kind of on the
stolen.
run, like a fugitive,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. Um, and you have to find someone who's willing to feed you, and you have to have the money to be able to pay for these things. So in order to make money, you have to uh, successfully roll to do the shipyard stuff because you'll get paid. And so it all kind of runs into each other. The highlight of this game, and I can't stress this enough, like, there's no real action. You're not controlling anyone, but it is so wondrously written. Like, it is the kind of writing that you wish you can do as a writer, Like, even though there are no real cutscenes to speak of, everything that you are reading has it happen in your mind. It is. I mentioned tabletop RPG earlier, and it's like the best DM in the world is running a game for you, and they just have this absolutely stunning, touching, vivid imagery and words and language. And I mean, the story is intriguing. I want so bad to like help the people that I'm running into, but I also have to keep in mind that I'm being hunted and I have to keep my body from deteriorating, and I want my rolls to all do well, but I only have a certain amount of rolls, so I can't help everybody and do everything that I want. And it's a really fantastic game. It's one of those games that like, if nothing else, you should be playing this among maybe a handful of games this year. And I'm so disappointed that it didn't win at the Game Awards. I was rooting for it, but yeah, absolutely, this is a game to play.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but amazing things. I believe it was Wesley LeBlanc who reviewed it for us, and he has done nothing but just try and sell me on this game. And
Right.
I bought it. I bought it when it came out
Yeah.
after he gave me that, and I just haven't fired it up because, as the catchphrase goes on this show, with what time?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I really do need like 48-hour days, but no more than 8 hours to work of that. So I need 40 hours to play video games is basically what I'm saying per day in order to get caught up on my backlog of this year alone, let alone all the games that I want to play from previous years. So it's just a losing gambit. But anyway, Citizen Sleeper is at the top of my list in terms of like games I want to check out before I kind of render my official top 10 personal list,
Yeah.
which is going to be an issue that hits in early 2023 for us. So I will need to do that prior to that, so that way I can make sure that this game is at least given its fair shake in my. Because I don't know if it's really going to be up my alley, to be honest.
I mean, I thought the same thing because of like I'm not usually in the sci-fi themes area, but literally you have to give it at least half an hour of your time, and I would be surprised if after that half an hour you don't just continue.
All right. Well, how long is the game itself?
I'm not entirely sure. It probably depends a lot on everything that you're doing.
Sure.
But it might be a question for Wes on that one.
Okay. Well, if you're interested in Citizen Sleeper, which it sounds like you should be, that came out May 5th and it costs $20. So now we have one that I have been championing ever since it came to Switch, and that is Mini Motorways, which came out on May 11th. And I am more than happy to talk about this one because you just kind of spilled all of your excitement about Citizen Sleeper. So I'm gonna chat about Mini Motorways here. I've talked about it in a past episode, but just to kind of re-highlight this, basically it is a kind of like a smaller scale, like simulation style game meets a puzzle game. So you are given a city, and I think it uses like geographies of real cities, but you are responsible for drawing roads and connecting destinations. There's another game that came out prior to this called Mini Metro that was a big hit on mobile. That is
Mhm.
also on Switch, which is funny because I think Mini Metro controls better on like tablets and mobile, but I think Mini Motorways controls a lot better on Switch than it does on mobile, which it started on as an Apple Arcade title,
Mhm.
and now it's on Switch, and it's just one of my favorite experiences of the year, to be honest. Like, just it's so satisfying to connect these different destinations. Like, so it's like there's houses that pop up, and then there's like businesses that you need to connect them to. So like if a red house pops up, you need to make sure that has an efficient route to a red business. And same thing with like greenhouses, purple houses. You need to make sure they're connecting to the corresponding businesses. And you can do that through like different, like just direct roads, but you then, like, as different destinations and points of origin start popping up, you have to start like crossing over, like, all right, well, this is now going to come into this one area where cars can come into this intersection and then go the direction they need to, but then that becomes backed up, so you can install like a traffic circle. And every in-game week, which I believe is like a few minutes of real time, every in-game week is you get like an additional power up. So you can choose like, all right, well, I want more road tiles to draw because you have like a finite resource of roads, right? And so you could choose extra tiles, or you can choose like special things like, all right, I want a highway that I can draw that'll make it so like if there's like a red house on the opposite side of the map that can reach to the red destination or red office, that is, you can do a highway, so that way like it doesn't worry about, it can skip all the traffic and reach all the way on the other side without any hassle. And then you could do like traffic circles and stoplights and things of that nature. And it's just really, really meditative. But then like it starts off really slow and you're like, all right, well, this is really easily managed. And then by the end, you are going frantic, like trying to like keep it alive. And like if it becomes too much, like too backed up, then it's game over and it's a fail state. So it's a really fun game, and I cannot recommend it enough. If you have like any kind of excitement about like simulation or kind of like solving, like if you ever played like Cities in Motion on Steam, where it's like basically like I mean, Cities in Motion was the predecessor to Cities Skyline, which is one of my favorite simulation games of all time. but Cities in Motion was purely focused on like traffic management and like maintaining the flow of traffic throughout a city. This is like a very simplified version of that, but I think it's extremely satisfying.
Well, you're here to hear. Everybody go out and play Mini Motorways.
So that came out May 11th, and it costs $15. But also, like, you know, if you have Apple Arcade like I do, you can also check it out there and see if it's for you before you dive in. But
Shay, this is a Nintendo podcast.
It is. How dare I? And the next one is one that actually just recently came to PlayStation.
Woo!
But it came first to PC and Switch, and that is Neon White.
Yes.
This is the sole June release that we are having on this list, I believe. And I mean, you can talk about why it's great. I can talk about why it's great. What would you prefer?
You go right on ahead. This is a game that didn't strike too hard for me because there is a definite personality for this game, and that personality was not for me, but it is obviously well made and very gripping. So go ahead, Shay.
So I would agree. It has kind of like a grating story. Like the story is very in your face, but I think it knows that, right?
Yeah.
Like it is very self-aware, and like I think Blake, who reviewed it for us, said it where it was like it feels like the story feels like a game from like the early 2000s. In that, like it's very, very like it's bombastic, I think is a good way to put it. The story.
Yes. Like I think the developer said it was a game for freaks by freaks.
Yes. I think Blake actually referenced that in his review, and that's a very good way to put it. The story I could take or leave, right? Like I think like the humor and like the ham-handed like storytelling that they go for is very hit or miss for me. The gameplay is so tight. It's a first-person shooter speedrunning game. And basically you're put into these levels and you have to just reach the end as fast as possible. But like you can do so with all these different weapons and different like kind of like traversal mechanics, and you get bonuses for taking out enemies in a certain way. And it's so satisfying to play these levels over and over again and like find like, oh, this is the optimal path here. And like, once you're through it, you can go back and try to set the high score on a particular level. And it's very fun to find the correct route through the level and capitalize on all the skills that you learn over the course of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard when you see your friends' times popped up not to try to beat that. So it is a game that perpetually like makes you want to play it. Also should be noted that all of the abilities and the guns and weapons are cards.
Yes.
That you can use or discard, and using them does one thing, discarding them does another thing, and sort of figuring out all of those mechanics and how those work together and getting all the synergy together for those is really very satisfying.
Yeah, it is just, it's very fun to put together your optimal loadout, I guess, is like the it's kind of weird. Like I was debating whether I should say hand or deck or loadout or what, but like, yeah, it's a very fun game to do that, and it's one of the better indie games of the year if you're the right person for it, as you had mentioned. Like some people like yourself may bounce off of it, but other people like Blake insist that it's the game of the year. So like, and my one caveat would be that, you know, it's available on PC, it's on Switch, and now it recently came to PlayStation. If you don't have a Pro controller, I would recommend playing it on one of the other platforms, because I don't think the Joy-Cons are good for shooters at all. But if you have a Pro controller, this plays great.
Right.
So that's my one caveat for Neon White on Switch. Otherwise, like, you know, Switch is a great platform. That's how I've played it, but I also have a couple of Pro controllers that I can use for a situation like that.
Yeah, I played it on Switch as well, and you know, works 100%.
Yes. That came out June 16th, and it costs $25. Jill, I'm going to let you take this one away, because this is one that you suggested, which is Lost in Play, and that came out August 10th. So talk to me about Lost in Play.
Lost in Play is so enchanting. I'm sad that more people are not talking about this game. It is essentially a point and click adventure, which a lot of people tune out when they hear. But it is really modern in the way that it does things, and it first of all, just the look of it. It is a hand-drawn game about fantasy and a child's ability to create make believe. So you're in these fanciful realms, and the tasks that you are performing are usually very silly, whimsical kinds of things, like helping a bunch of frogs get a sword out of a stone. Um, but everything is just so unique and well developed and clever, you know? Like I couldn't come up with the various different gameplay mechanics that they have. Like there's one part of the game where you're trying to run away from a monster because, of course, there's a giant monster trying to attack you in your fantasy realm, um, where you have to keep one step ahead of him at all times, and it turns into kind of a top-down game where you are playing a sort of chess game with a monster, and if you don't win, you get eaten. But in general, it is just a fanciful, beautiful, lovely experience with a little girl and boy siblings experiencing the world through their imagination, and it is 100% just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous to look at. And I couldn't recommend this enough, and I really want to get the word out there that Lost in Play is such a wonderful experience that I think a lot of people have missed out on. So please, please check it out.
It sounds like a really great time. I completely missed this when it came out. Was this its initial launch, or was it on other platforms first?
This was its initial launch.
Oh wow! And
Yeah.
I just completely flew under my radar.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of those games that I'm like, this deserves to have more, hoopla around it, and it just doesn't. So please play.
I'm gonna highlight that and
Do it.
make a note to come back and add that to my wish list on Switch. I've said it so many times during eShop Gem of the Week, where it's like, it is such a dangerous
Yes.
segment for me because I've probably dropped $100 just from that segment alone of like, oh, this sounds amazing, I'm gonna buy it right now. So I've tried to utilize the wish list functionality and wait for those games to go on sale before I pick them up. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna buy these games and then never play them because I go a little I go a little trigger happy with buying these games as I hear about how great they are from my various guests.
Yeah.
But Lost in Play sounds like one I'm going to definitely add to my wish list and then see if it pops up at any point on sale. But that came out August 10th and costs $20. So I appreciate you pointing that out. I have a run of games here that I really like that I'm happy to talk about. But if you have any, like if you want to jump in on any of these as I rattle them off, you let me know.
100%, I'll do it.
So first up, Cult of the Lamb. This is one that I think a lot of people were really excited for. It finally came out August 11th. And I think the best way to describe this is like Animal Crossing, like kind of social simulation, like building up an island of sorts. I'm not quite as involved as Animal Crossing in that regard, but
it's like cult management
/ Animal Crossing, like villager meeting, only instead of like making friends, you're indoctrinating followers, and then you can sacrifice them at the altar if they become disrespectful or problematic or lose faith in you.
Or then ask you to like make poop for them. That was one that was an automatic death sentence for me.
Yeah, the animals do poop when they eat, and then you have to clean up the poop.
And some of them are like, I secretly would always have wanted to eat poop. And I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. You're going to get sacrificed.
Yeah, it's there's some grotesque elements to this, but like, you're at there, you can give sermons to like improve their faith. You can like level up. You gain new abilities as like their faith strengthens and build new areas around your island. But then when you go out into the field, like basically like you're going on like a missionary trip, basically is the way they frame it. It's basically like Hades. And like Hades meets Binding of Isaac, I think, is like the way I would describe the combat. And it is really fun and really satisfying from a combat perspective. And that's what really hooked me. Like the cult management stuff was fun, but it's like it's not quite on the level of Animal Crossing in terms of like how satisfying it is and how involved it is, and like it's like being able to kind of develop your island in that way. Like it's just like, okay, well I acquired these resources while I was out and I can do some cool stuff with it. It's the combat that really hooked me with Cult of the Lamb.
That's so funny because I'm 100% the opposite. It is the management stuff that caught me to like, okay, I have to set up my field to make crops so I can feed everybody so they don't, starve to death, but also everybody's faith is starting to diminish, so I have to go and give a sermon, but I'm out of, like, I can't do more than one sermon a day, so I have to figure out something else I can do, and I have to set up sanitary facilities so everybody can stop pooping all over the place. I have to make sure, oh no, this person's become sick, so I have to like find a way to plant flowers to help them. And I was constantly running back and forth to like try to help everybody, and then going out to fight for me was a just another branch of ways to get resources to help my cult grow.
Okay. Well, I mean that's ultimately what going out into the field is, right?
Right.
It's a means to an end, but it's also, I think, the more fun part. But then again, I'm more of like an action gamer anyway.
Yeah.
Like it's
I mean,
weird.
that's what's great about this game is like you and I came at it from totally different, interests, but it was able to hold both of those in perfectly like wonderful ways, which is why I mean, Cult of the Lamb really is one of the best games of this year.
Yeah, I'm looking at my top 10 list here, and it's just outside of my top 10.
Mhm.
And this the end of this year has been ridiculous in terms of like how
Yeah.
many games, and you'll see that we're in August right now, and we still have a long way to go chronologically to get to the end of like this list of the
Yes.
best indie games of the year. So we're not going to dwell too long on Cult of the Lamb, but suffice to say, it's one of my favorite games of 2022, regardless of indie designation or
Mhm.
AAA designation. Like I think that this is one that almost everybody should check out.
Yeah.
And it's $25, so it's pretty reasonable, and I think it's been on sale a couple of times since it came out. So that is one that I wholeheartedly recommend. Just like this next one, which if Jill, you know me, you know that
Yep.
I love The Legend of Zelda.
Yes, I do.
One of the best Legend of Zelda games is A Link to the Past.
That's true.
And I've talked about this game, which pays very close homage to A Link to the Past, and that is Blossom Tales 2, The Minotaur Prince. I played the first one when it came out. God, when was that? Like 2019, 2018? It was Blossom Tales, The Sleeping King. And that was very good. And it was like, oh, yeah, the developer played Legend of Zelda Link to the Past and said, I want to make this game, but like my own. And that's essentially carried on through Blossom Tales 2, The Minotaur Prince. I had a really good time with this. It's not a super long game, but it's very fun. It very much borrows the Link to the Past formula of like going around and like gathering up these new items, new weapons, new abilities, and then that allows you to go into like the next dungeon, and then like you do a lot of dungeon crawling. There's always a boss battle at the end, and there's a lot of really fun stuff. There's a couple frustrating elements to it at times, but I think that the dungeon design is really well done. The boss battles are terrific, and it's a really solid experience, especially if you're a Zelda fan, which I'd imagine if you're listening to All Things Nintendo, you probably have some affection for The Legend of Zelda. But anyway, it came out August 16th, and it costs $15. Have you played this at all?
I have not. It's on my list.
Okay, the first one's also very good. I don't think it's really like oh, it hasn't aged well, but no, it's kind of like one of those timeless 16-bit homages
Mhm.
to the Link to the Past. So very much recommend that. Just like I recommend this next one, which is Mixolumia. Have you even heard of this one, Jill?
I have not. When you surfaced this the first time, I was like, I have no idea what this is. I'm very excited to hear about it.
So I discovered this a couple of years ago on Twitter. It was a guy tweeting out like, "Oh, I have this concept." I mean, this was probably a few years ago at this point. He's like, "I have this concept for this puzzle game," and it was like basically like a pyramid shape, right, where it's like a triangle, and it's like Tetris or like a Match Three, but like the blocks are like kind of like V shaped, and they
Hmm.
hit the top, they hit the pyramid, and they break off, and they go in different directions depending on like which part of the pyramid they hit, and you
Okay.
have to try to line them up and match it up and get like the different matches. And it I was like, oh, that's a really cool thing. I wish that was an actual game because it looks really satisfying and really fun. And then I saw the creator like a year or so later was like, oh, I made it a full game and I put it on itch.io. And which is, for people who don't know, it's like a kind of an indie haven.
Yeah.
website where it's like, all right, indie creators can put things up and they just list it for whatever price they want. And there's often like bundles. Like there was in summer 2020, there was like a social justice
Really
bundle,
good bundle. Yeah.
and it was like unbelievable. It was like drop like $20 or something like that, and it was like 150 or
Yeah,
200
it
games or
was
something like that.
literally more games than you could ever play.
I
It
did
was
that, and
so
like
good.
all the money went to oh god, what was it? Was it Black Lives Matter, or was it? It was something
It
in
was,
support of like racial justice.
yeah, it was either Black Lives Matter or it was the people that were keeping people out of jail. I can't remember exactly
Oh,
what
okay,
that.
yeah.
Hmm.
So I was like, but anyway, going back to so that I don't think Mixolumia was a part of that bundle, or maybe it was, and I already owned it, because that was the reason I created an account on itch.io was for Mixolumia, because I was like, oh man, this game looks incredible. I think I paid like $2 for it on that, and it's become more and more full featured over the course of its life. And then I was like, man, I wish I was on something other than PC. And lo and behold, August 25th, it came to Switch.
What?
And it's $15 now, so like don't think it's going to be like another one of those like really really cheap games, but like
Hmm.
if you like Tetris, I would say this is kind of up your alley, which, who doesn't like Tetris?
Right.
But I recommend this one a lot, and it's really fun, and there's some really cool like visual effects that go along with it, and some great musical elements to it. And yeah, Mixolumia.
Mixolumia.
Check it out.
What would you have done if I was like, I hate Tetris?
I would have been like, all right, you're the first
Get
person
off
I've
my
ever heard say
podcast.
that. Maybe the most successful video game of all time.
Of all time. Yep.
Here's another one that kind of caught me off guard. This is a game that pays homage, I think, in a lot of ways to a popular Nintendo franchise, but maybe like more of like a B tier Nintendo franchise. And the franchise I'm talking about is Pikmin.
Hmm.
This is a game called Tinykin, which we've talked
Yep.
about a couple times. I think Kyle Hilliard actually brought it up as an eShop gem one episode. And then I later had somebody on it. Oh, was it Marcus that reviewed it for us? Somebody reviewed it for us, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to have you on to talk about it as a full segment. So it like kind of graduated out of the eShop gem realm, which is kind of a rarity because a lot of times those are older games, and it's like we wouldn't really be talking about them anyway.
Hmm.
But Tinykin was kind of eShop gem and then main segment, and it is a really fun time. I only played like the first several hours of it, but I had a really great time with it. Did you play any of this?
Yeah, I'm with you. I've only played the first couple of hours of it. It's brilliant. It's 100% brilliant, and that's sort of why I only played the first couple of hours, because I'm like, yep, this is brilliant. I don't need to play any more to know that this is a great game. And there's a lot more to play right now, so I had to put it down. I mean, among the indie circles, it is considered certainly one of the best indie games of this year, if not one of the best games. It is, I mean, you think of Jeffcore because it's a tiny person in a big world.
Yes.
Um, but you are in a house and you are very tiny, and you're just going around and sort of exploring, and you are finding these creatures called tinykin who, like Pikmin, have different types, and the different types do different things. So some of them like allow you to connect one to the other and put electricity through things, and some of them are like stronger than others, and it's just a lot of fun solving the puzzles. And it's silly because you're in a house and you recognize that, but it's all kind of weird because it's supersized, and the the house, like the background graphics are all in 3D, but your character is in this lovely 2D hand drawn
Yeah, like almost like a piece
aesthetic.
of paper walking through the
Yes.
house.
So that adds such an interesting visual quality to everything, and everything is the mechanics are great. The story is fun. There's no element of this that I have anything critical to say of. It is just a brilliant experience.
And it came out August 30th, and it costs $25, which that's kind of like the median price, I feel like, of of
Hmm.
these games. But this next one is actually probably the most expensive game on the entire list.
Ooh.
And that is, there's been no shortage of Pokemon experiences in 2022. We've had Pokemon Legends Arceus in the early
Hmm.
part of this year. We just recently had Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Temtem is the game I'm talking about. That came out September 6th. Basically, it tried to capitalize on the fact that everybody wanted a Pokemon MMORPG.
Mm-hmm.
So it is constantly connected to online, and you go around to basically the typical Pokemon formula before Scarlet and Violet, where you start off in a small town and you go through different routes and get to towns and then battle like creatures and along the way and battle like not gym leaders. I don't think they call them gym leaders in
Right.
Temtem, but like you reach a town and there's like a master trainer that you're supposed to battle or tamer. I'm sorry, I think they're called tamers in Temtem, but you tame these wild Temtem and you have to use them in battle. And the battles are 2v2, which are they're always 2v2, which there are 2v2 battles in Pokemon as well, but I think the default in Temtem is 2v2. And I had a really great time with like I think I put about like 6 or 7 hours into this and I had a really fun time with it. I think that it's a solid effort to emulate the Pokemon formula in a slightly different way, and
Mm-hmm.
it was one that if I didn't have a billion other games to check out, I probably would have stuck with all the way
Right.
through the main story. But
And if there weren't two big Pokemon experiences out this year too,
oh,
I think it
100%.
probably would have been like if we'd had a huge like drought of Pokemon, this probably would have leapt up people's lists a little bit more. But as it is, it's a perfectly lovely Pokemon-esque experience that does change things with, like there's a
Oh yeah, the
stamina,
stamina is great. I love that system.
yes, system, and it's changing things up with how the typical Pokemon formula works. So it is a unique, interesting experience.
For sure. And as I had alluded to, it's probably the most expensive game on this episode at $45. But, if you are a Pokemon fan, you're either done with Pokemon Legends Arceus, done with Scarlet and Violet, and you want something else along those lines, or maybe you're just unsatisfied with Scarlet and Violet in particular. I know a lot of people couldn't get over the technical issues. I saw past them and, not saw past them in the sense that I ignored them in my
Right.
review, but I ended up having a good time with those games regardless. I would say in spite of the technical problems.
Hmm.
But if you want something that's, kind of that same formula, check out Temtem. Jill, this is a game that I know you were pretty enthusiastic about.
Yes.
This came out September 15th. It is Bear and Breakfast. Talk to me about why this game is great. I played a little bit of it, but I think that you were the one that was like, you were psyched for this.
Yeah, I think it's me and Van Aken that were the huge team members excited about this. Bear and Breakfast caters to a lot of my interests. One highest being absurdist humor. It is 100% an absurd concept for a game. You are playing as a bear, and the bear wandering through the woods with friends comes across an inflatable shark, like you do,
Mm-hmm.
and he pushes a button, and it turns out that the inflatable shark is a mascot for a sort of Airbnb type uh, company, and very capitalist minded. It is like an AI, it's not a real thing. It is trying to recruit people to start building things up in the forest so that people can come there and have a nice little forest experience and vacation time. And so the bear decides, that's what I'm gonna do. I like, for whatever reason, he thinks that people coming to the forest will bring like life back into the forest. It will bring more trash for his like rat friends and panda friends and all the raccoons and things that like trash. So he doesn't really think too much about what that means for the forest itself, like the fact that people might not be great for his habitat. He's just been given this quest and he starts, building up little hotels. So that's a big part of the gameplay is hotel management. So you start by cleaning up a dinky little cabin and making a few rooms, and you have the ability to create walls and to build furniture. And as you go on, you get more recipes so that you can build things bigger and grander and get more points out of the things because you get you get at the end of a stay, the human will like review their stay. And so they review based on things like comfort and sanitation and things like that. So the more you go, the better things you can make. So you can make like a super futuristic toilet that people will, enjoy using, or
Finally. Been waiting on that
um,
super futuristic toilet.
yeah,
I mean, the
bigger
closest I've ever gotten is when I
beds.
go to Japan and they have bidets on everything.
Exactly. And then you come back and you're like, what's even the point of living anymore? Um,
By the way, when you said like this plays into like some of my biggest interests, I thought you were gonna say first bears, second
bears.
breakfast.
Yes. Both great things. But yeah, so like there is absurdist humor, and then you've got this fun management system, but it's really laid back, like there are a lot of management games where you're constantly having to like be involved in everything, but it's like once you get things kind of set up, it sort of runs itself, especially with a character that you meet later on, that it becomes sort of your concierge, and they uh, help things run a little easier. And then once you get to a certain point, you open up a new area, which may be like a desert area with a diner next door, or like a snowy region where you have to keep the furnace running and all of that jazz. Um, and there's a really interesting story going on underneath the surface of all of this kind of uh, silly, whimsical, absurdist sort of, like a bear is pretending to be a human who's running bed and breakfasts across uh, this little area. Um, and it the story seemed like it gets strangely dark for
Oh
what's
no.
happening. Like there's at the very beginning of the game, you are sleeping, and there is a figure, some sort of dark entity in your dreams that's speaking to you and telling you things, and you see this figure several times throughout your play, and you don't really know what's going on with that, and you're not really thinking about what your actions are causing to happen in the world, and you're meeting people who sort of hint at like, hey, maybe this isn't great, but since you're like, you're a kind of empty-headed, uh, optimistic, like overly optimistic creature. So you're just like, hey, I'm doing a great job and I am making my bed and breakfasts the best they are, and not thinking about what ramifications may be coming because of that.
Mm.
So there's this interesting tug and pull and something happening a little bit beneath the surface that I also really enjoy.
Well, if Bear and Breakfast sounds up your alley, I actually bought a copy and played it for a couple hours, but you seem like you've put a lot more time into it than I have.
Yeah.
I also played it at Summer Game Fest this past June, and that was like, oh, okay, the controller does work well with this. Because I was concerned about that, because it is on PC as well, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I've played with a controller and it's lovely.
Great. I recommend this if you are into that type of simulation style and management style, and it sounds like the story goes some places.
Hmm.
So that's $20 if that is up your alley. Here's one that I don't think either of us really have a ton of experience with. I have no experience with it aside from editing our review of it.
Right.
You, I think, have maybe checked it out or have a little bit more knowledge about it. It is Return to Monkey Island.
Yes.
That came out September 19th. So talk to me about that.
Return to Monkey Island is, I did play a little bit of this. It is another point and click kind of adventure. The humor is a little on the teens side, but not in a way that, you know, is detrimental, but not kind of that darker absurdist humor like Bear and Breakfast. And you are playing as a pirate who has gone to Monkey Island. Monkey Island has a secret, which you've never found, so you're interested in going back and finding what the actual secret is. But your ultimate arch nemesis of all time, LeChuck, is
Mm-hmm.
going also to the island, to find the secret before you, and that's how things kind of kick off. This is a follow up to a series that is, to my knowledge, like decades old.
Yeah, 1990 was when The Secret of Monkey Island came out. And
Yes.
ever since then, we've had Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge, The Curse of Monkey Island, Escape from Monkey Island, Tales of Monkey Island, The Secret of Monkey Island Special Edition. Ooh. And
Yeah.
then Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge Special Edition. But the last, like, actual new Monkey Island game was 2009 with Tales of Monkey Island. And this is, the revitalization of that LucasArts style, or LucasArts franchise, because they're the ones that started it. And
Hmm.
now Telltale had they had the Tales of Monkey Island, and now it is Devolver who's actually publishing this.
Right. Yeah. And it is a lot of fun. It reminds me in a lot of ways of like Ren and Stimpy type Cartoon Network sort of cartoon, and in just the way that it looks, but also in a lot of the humor. So it, yeah, it is a fun game, and if you are a fan of the series, this is a huge thing to happen because you waited so long, and it came kind of out of the blue that you were getting another adventure. And from what I understand, it encapsulates and concludes the adventure in a very satisfying kind of way. For what I played of it, it is very cleverly built point and click. It has commentary on like kind of social things. So like the last games, like you can see how things change from like the 90s and early 2000s to like now.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to originally go to the head pirates council, and instead of it being three men, white dudes, it's three women and African American man, and you have commentary on like, oh, things have changed a little bit since the last time we were here. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's got fun storytelling. It's swashbuckling, and if you're a fan of the series, you should definitely check it out. If you're interested in that kind of uh, fun humor and checking out how point and click has kind of changed in modern eras, this might be for you.
Yeah, and I've heard from fans of the series that this is a very satisfying continuation of the story. So if you have any kind of affection for those games back in the day, then this is a no-brainer for you. But anyway, it is $25 if you are wanting to check that out. Here's another one that you were kind of wanting us to add to this list, Jill, and that came
Hmm.
out September 22nd. It is Beacon Pines. So what is this game's
Yes.
story? I have no idea about this game.
The conceit of this game is very interesting. You start off reading a story. So it is that kind of conceit of you are writing a story as you are playing. Um, the interesting part of this is that as you play, you come across charms, which are essentially words that you can use in the story. And when you hit a branching point, you can use the words that you found, but only the ones you found so far. So the you put it into the story, and it may branch into, like, the first time I had a really serious branching moment, I only had one word. So using that word, the story branched into essentially you got caught and you died. And they're
All
like,
right.
wait, but this isn't how the story should end. So you go back and go find, they're like, okay, so let's try it again. So you kind of rewind and you can go back to the point of the story that, didn't go well, and go out and find more uh, words and input them. And then that goes into another branch, which then, while you're discovering that branch, you discover more words. And eventually you get to another branch from that branch. And then you put in a word, and maybe that doesn't go well. So you go back. So it is a sort of time loop game in that way, which is very interesting.
Hmm.
But unlike a lot of time loop games, you're not retreading the same spaces because you always start. Your starting point is familiar, but your branch is going to be new. because you now have a different word to use. So you you pick up knowledge from the other branches. So you know who the bad guy is. Like, you as the player know who the bad guy is. But if you start off at an earlier branch than that, then you don't know as the character, you know? So you might, as the player, make different choices based on what you know. And so the story is constantly evolving and growing and branching out. And so that's a really cool concept. I'm also quite taken with the artistic style. It is a sort of very lush, painterly style that looks a little bit like a storybook, based on, the theme of the story being like you're telling the story as you're going. And yeah, it is you are centered on a 12-year-old, I believe he's a deer, but a boy. And his father has passed away 6 years ago. His mother has recently disappeared, and we don't know what that means. He's living with his grandmother, and weird things are happening in his small town of Beacon Pines. And so the story gets weird and it gets dark in a way that you're not really expecting. It's not scary, but it's like, oh, from this kind of storybook art style, I was not expecting this child to just die. So yeah, it's
subversive.
Very not what you're expecting, and very, like, I started playing just to kind of check it out, and I got drawn into it, and I looked up and like hours had gone by because I'm like, I want to see what happens if I put this other word in, or I can't let it end this way or let my friend be in trouble. I have to go save them. Very well done.
Well, if you are interested in Beacon Pines, that is $20. So, Jill, just one day later, we had another game, and this is a continuation of an indie darling franchise as a whole. The Shovel Knight franchise is one that I think a lot of people have a lot of affection for. It, paid homage to those early platformers from like the NES era. This is a new entry in that series, Shovel Knight Dig, and that came out September 23rd. Basically, it reminds me of like kind of like a mobile style game where like you're just digging down farther and further. But have you had a chance to check this out?
Not too much. As far as kind of my opinion on this goes, it is Shovel Knight. It is more Shovel Knight. It does what Shovel Knight does well, and if you're a fan of it, then this should be right up your alley.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of spending more time on some of these games than I would like us to, just because of how many games we have. Mm-hmm. But this is a game that I think that a lot of people kind of missed, because it's there's been so many Shovel Knight games at this point, like expansions, and like the Shovel Knight Treasure Trove is a great place to start. But if you get through that and then you're like, oh, I want more of this seems like a great place to go from there. And I think that, a lot of people missed out on it because it's just been a very busy year, especially like I'm looking at the list that I have here. And again, it's ordered chronologically. We're on September 23rd is when Shovel Knight Dig came out. We have 4 more games in the month of September before we close this out. And it is just absurd how busy this was. But I know that, who was it that reviewed it for us? I know Alex Van Aken liked it a lot. And a few other people on Game Informer staff enjoyed it. And it's one that I've been meaning to check out. I think this is another one of those ones where I bought it when it came out and then just haven't had a chance to play too much of it. So it's $25 if you're interested. What were you going to say?
It looks like it was Wes who did the review.
Okay, it was Wes who did the review. But yeah, $25 if you are interested in digging into this. See what I did there? I actually didn't even mean to do that. But I know one that you're going to have a lot to say about, Jill. And you sound like you're like barely holding back your excitement as I intro this one.
My glee.
I think this was your highest scored review that you ever gave at Game Informer.
Yes.
What was it, a 9.5, 9.75?
9.75.
Wow, one of the highest scored reviews, of all time.
Yeah.
Like it's in
and
like
deservedly
the top 30, I think, of all time review scores, maybe top 50 if you account all 9.75s. It's Tunic. It
Yeah.
came out. Was that last year on
No, it
Xbox?
was originally March of this year.
Okay, so it came out earlier this year on Xbox, but it hit Switch on September 27th and PlayStation.
Yep.
But this is,
So
I
it's
mean,
everywhere.
could you think of a more tailor-made for the Switch audience
No,
than
it's
Tunic?
Tunic is, I mean, first of all, Tunic is my game of 2022. It is literally the best game this year, and it might be one of my favorite games of my adult life.
Wow.
Yes, that is how much the esteem I hold this game in. Um, just on the weight of that, I hope people check it out. But it is so good to see it on the Switch because the legacy of it is Zelda. It is so Zelda inspired. It has Dark Souls elements in combat, but the design of this game and the way that it works is so Zelda that it's unbelievable. It is one of those things where we always have discussions of if you could play a game for the first time all over again, what would you do? And you can't do that, but Tunic is almost the ability to play Zelda again for the first time.
Wow.
You know, it is a way to jump back into your childhood when you didn't know like so much about video games, so you still had that ability for awe and wonder and not knowing like what's coming next. And Tunic kind of succeeds in this because it focuses a lot on not telling you anything, which is a very old school design kind of concept. You do get a manual, which is so nostalgic for a lot of reasons. That
It's
tells
an
you
in-game
it
manual.
is in game, yes. So you're picking up pieces of it in the game. So you are being drip fed sort of instructions on how to do things
But
and
it's in a different language
maps.
as well.
But yeah, that's the thing is it tells you everything you need to know without telling you anything because it's 100% gibberish. There is no way to read this language except if you translate it later.
Oh.
100%. It is like Fez in that way. You can, in fact, there is a grammatic ability to understand the language if you want to go that far, but you
Oh
don't
my
have to.
god.
It's a game about secrets and uncovering secrets, and like a treasure chest could be right around the corner because the top down isometric sort of view doesn't allow you to always see everything. So you might just duck around a corner and find a treasure chest you didn't know was there, or you might find a secret route to a place you didn't know existed until just now. Um, but it is very Zelda in uh, you have a sword and a shield and you're going out and you're fighting monsters and you don't really know why, and the story gets really intriguing as you go on as to like what you might be doing here and how things work. And it's really, really hard not to spoil this game by talking about things. But 100% my love for this game is undiminished, and I urge everybody to play this. If you have a list of things you need to get to, this should be at the top of it.
it I've heard nothing but praise for this game, and I've from the time that I spent with it, which I didn't beat it, but I did spend a decent amount of hours with it. Yeah, I had an absolute blast, and I was playing it on Xbox back when it first came out, and it is right up my alley. And
Hmm.
the way you describe it almost makes me think of like the way I feel about Breath of the Wild, where it reinstated that childlike sense of wonder that I had
Hmm.
with like a game like Ocarina of Time.
Yeah,
So I think
100%.
that like Tunic, that's what I loved about Breath of the Wild so much. So I really need to go back to Tunic. Like it's driving me crazy that
Please do.
I haven't played more of this game. But it's if you want to check it out on Switch, it is $30, and as I mentioned, it came out September 27th. So Jill, we're going to another one that I believe you added to this list, and that is Penko Park.
Pinko Park.
So same out that same day, September 27th. So talk to me
Yeah.
about this.
Uh, Another game that's very similar and a good reason to have it on Nintendo. It's kind of Pokemon Snap.
Oh,
Uh,
oh, that's right. I do remember this. At first I didn't
yes.
recognize it, but now I totally remember this game.
For some reason, there is an abandoned sort of uh, natural park, and you are going through on rails and taking pictures of the various creatures throughout. Um, and it's a lovely sort of relaxing time, but then you start to get hints of something might be wrong. Some There's something that might not be 100% on the up and up about what's been going on here. And I wouldn't say it was scary if anybody is worried, but it does get a little spooky. Um, and it works if you've played Pokemon Snap. You get the idea. It's you take pictures. You're trying to get the best pictures you can. You get your pictures rated. I think you get stars, and the more stars you get allows you to open up new areas. So you've got like the basic wildland park, and you've got like snowy regions and lava regions, and um, it, it's all like a little environmental puzzles to sort of trigger as you're going, and you can collect hats, which are really silly. And it is just a fun, relaxing time with the intriguing story.
Awesome. And this one is substantially cheaper than other games on this list. It is $13. So it's a pretty low cost of entry. If you had seen something like, if you played New Pokemon Snap, or you fired up the N64 catalog on your Switch and played the original Pokemon Snap, and you're wanting something kind of more like that and don't mind not having like the recognizable faces of Pokemon in it, Penko Park sounds like it could be something that scratches that itch for you.
Mm-hmm.
So next up is a game. Have you heard of this game? Because I played a good amount of this when it came out in September 29th to be exact. It's called Let's Build a Zoo.
Yeah, 100%. I didn't get into it because I had other things that, Tunic and Pinko Park were high up on my list there. But yeah, I am totally intrigued by this idea, but I'll let you go ahead
Yeah, sure.
and
So
wax poetic.
it's basically like a management sim. Imagine that, because I am all about these management sims. And as the name implies, you build a zoo, and it starts off where you just have a few like enclosures and a few different animal species that you can put in there, and then it quickly becomes like this global operation where you can trade animals across, like, and you can breed animals. There's even like weird stuff where it's like there's a morality system. So like a black market dealer will come up and be like, hey, I can sell you like a rhino or something, and you can either like take them up on the offer because it's a lot cheaper to buy from the black market guy than it is from like an actual like authorized like wildlife dealer, or you can actually turn the black market dealer into the police.
Nice.
And like it all affects like your morality. Or like there's also like opportunities where like an artist will come up, and like a local artist will come to your zoo and be like, hey, like studies have shown that like people really want to see like blue horses or something like that. I can paint one of your horses blue. And it's like, it's not good for the animal. So like if you want to do that, like it'll affect your morality, but like you might get more visitors in for that. So like there's all these different things you can choose. You can also like do like genetic splicing if you want to make like, I had like a pig with like the head of a duck. It's very, very weird, and like it's a fun kind of absurd zoo simulation, and it it's as weird as you want it to be. I don't think it
Mm-hmm.
gets too weird at any one point based on what I've played, and I've played several hours of it. But it's also like just it's a solid management sim, and I think that people should check it out if they're into that type of thing with a little, and they don't mind a little bit of weird humor, and it's also kind of got like that 16-bit aesthetic.
Right. Yeah, this is one that I am very interested in and mean to check out, but
Came out of a busy time.
it came out at a busy time, and I am more intrigued because of the unusual like additions to it rather than just being another management sim. So again, another one on my list.
So I have a few here that I want to talk about, and the next one on my list is a game called Railgrade, and I'm not going to talk too much about this, but it's basically like they give you objectives, and your job is to build a railway system between these things, but you have to build them in such a way that like, all right, first we need to go to this and retrieve these materials, and then we take it to this processing plant, it refines the materials, and we'll load it back up in the train, and then you have to like solve these puzzles basically for like an order of operations, and like you can throw switches so like the trains will make sure that they're going in the right direction. And like it's a very fun, very competent management sim that came out the exact same day. And I think that it's a worthwhile title. Both of these games, by the way, Let's Build a Zoo and Railgrade, are $20 a piece. But I did do, I think, a mini segment about Railgrade back when it first came out. So you can go check that out if you want to hear more about that. Did you ever play Dwarf Romantic, Jill?
Yes, I did.
So I'm going to call an audible and add that to the list because I just remembered that came to Switch this year.
I think that means we hit 40 on this list.
We probably did. September 29th, Dwarf Romantic came out. Talk to me about this game.
It is a very relaxing sort of puzzly-ish. Like, it is based off of, if I remember correctly, it's based off of a tabletop game.
Yes.
And it's really just a relaxing, fun experience. Like, you are putting together little shapes, pentagons. What are they? Hexagons?
Yeah, it's a multi-sided shape, and but it's like all tile based, right?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and it's just a little like city building puzzle game. It doesn't take much to do. It's idyllic. It's beautiful. It's a lot of fun. I don't, if you have time for just like a nice Sunday morning relaxation time, this is a game to play.
And that is $15 on the eShop, by the way. So all three of these most recent games came out the same day, just to give you an indication of how busy this period was. So thankfully, we had like a week and a half where there were no major indie games coming out. I mean, there were several AAA titles in that time frame. So it's not like games journalists or people who keep up with all the latest games had any like reprieve. But one that I was immediately drawn to, and I'm not even a Lego guy, but Lego Brick Tales. Did you check this out at all? Because I spent several hours playing this. This came out October 12th. And basically it was the premise that got me, where it's like, all right, you have this thing that you need to solve for. And they give you a set number of Lego bricks and you have to build the solution, basically. It's like, all right, we need to build a bridge. How do you build a bridge with these Legos? So based on what they give you, you can build it, and like you have to test it to make sure like it will hold your weight. And there's other ones that are more involved, like you have to build this giant platform that'll support it, and it's like there's certain parts that have to be connected to certain other parts, and it gets a lot more involved than the kind of simple premise lays out for you. But I had a good time with what I played of it, and it's a game that kind of lets you flex like your building muscles, and then you can go back afterwards. By the way, if like say you put it all together and like you use the pieces that they give you to solve the puzzle, if you want to go back and make your creation look pretty, you can do that after the fact by like re-entering build mode on the completed project, and then you can like decorate it however you want. You can build like a canopy over the bridge that you did or whatever, just to make it look better. Because once you build it, it kind of takes you like this like kind of sandbox, like isolated mode. And then what it does is whatever you came up with to solve that solution, it now exists in this like diorama world that you're running around in. And it's just really satisfying to find the solution, put it together. There's usually multiple ways to solve a puzzle, but I mean, there's a straightforward way that you can often come up with. But that game came out October 12th and it sets you back $30. So it's a pretty solid experience overall. Have you had a chance to play this at all?
I have not, but I know that it looks lovely. It is graphically it looks like a lot of the Lego games, which are like look better than they have any right to have, but it also has like a little story with it too, right?
Yeah. So like you're trying to help, is it your grandfather, I think, or your dad or somebody you're trying to help somebody with like a science experiment. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, you have to go into this portal and go to all these different like biomes and everything. So yeah, there's a kind of a goofy off the wall story, but it's more the building aspect is the star of this game.
Makes sense.
So next up is another game that you wanted to add to this list. So I'm going to kind of step out of your way here. It's Paradise Marsh, and that is October 13th. So talk to me about this.
So kind of speaking of games to put on during a lazy Sunday, Paradise Marsh is a game that is built for you just to exist in. It has that sort of a short hike aesthetic with like uh, brighter colors on, in the palette, and uh, a sort of 2D, 3D-esque aesthetic to it. But you start the game and all the stars fall out of the sky.
Oh.
Um, and then you are plopped into the titular marsh, and it is your job to go around and just explore the world. You catalog everything that you see, you find bugs, you try to capture snails and fish, and when you do that, you recognize that some of them are the stars that you're looking for, and you can go to a stone in the kind of center of the marsh and put that star of a constellation up, and you are gaining abilities, and every star that you put up has a sort of thoughtful, pensive idea behind it, being like, maybe I should be who I am. And it is just a kind of cerebral experience. Like, it's a big brain, relaxing, so meditative, of just exploring a world that is full of life and interests and little environmental puzzles and things. It does something that I really enjoy in games, where you think, I wonder what would happen if I did that. Like, maybe something will happen. And then it rewards you for trying things. So, like, I'm walking past a bunch of clothes have fallen off a clothesline, and like, it doesn't tell you anything. This game doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't have quest lines or anything like that. And I'm like, huh, all the clothes are down. I wonder what would happen. And then, like, I pick it up and I put it on the clothesline, and it does actually go onto the clothesline, and you like get a little reward for doing that. So it's a game that a lot of people missed out on, and very, very dear, a very, very kind of touching experience, that I really want people to sort of look at and check out, because it is 100% worthwhile.
Awesome. Well, this was not even on my radar prior to this conversation, but it's $10. So at that price, I mean, it's hard to say no to something that you seem to endorse pretty wholeheartedly.
Yeah, 100%. Go check it out.
All right. Well, I will add another one to add to my wish list. I'm literally highlighting it in my document right now. One that I have wanted to check out but haven't had a chance to came out October 18th, and that is Them's Fightin' Herds.
Yeah, it's you and me both. The concept is so bizarre.
It's very silly.
It is a spiritual successor to a game that was an unlicensed version of like My Little Ponies.
Yes.
Essentially.
However, it's a fighting game.
Exactly.
But from what I understand, they actually got like one of the original artists of My Little Pony to create a whole cast of new characters.
Yeah, and it looks fantastic. It visually looks fantastic. I would have to get like Marcus, who's our big fighting champion, to like say if the fighting mechanics are any good, but from what I can see, it just looks like a ridiculous good time.
Yeah, this is one that I cannot wait to get my hands on. It's just I've been so busy. Like, this was right around the time that I was in Japan. So I was like writing our cover story, and then I jumped right into Sonic Frontiers, and then I jumped right into Pokemon, and then I jumped right into Need for Speed. So it's been kind of a nonstop thing, and unfortunately I have a little bit of a blind spot for a lot of these games that came out in October and November. But this is one that has been near the top of my list to check out, because I was in Japan to check out Street Fighter 6, so of course I like fighting games. So yeah. But I bought it when it first came out, and it is $20. So if you're interested in a fighting game, it sounds like it has some pretty good chops to it, but also like a very unique angle and a roster full of cartoon ponies, then yeah, Them's Fightin' Herds is the game for you. November 9th, we're jumping ahead a little bit here. We're getting kind of on the home stretch a little bit. this is a game that I checked out at Summer Game Fest and had a fun time with it. And it is called A Little to the Left. And
Yes.
I'm assuming you've checked this out, correct?
Yeah, I did a review for this on my site. It is, I think, probably the game that is the most uniquely satisfying of this year. Like, there is just something deeply, deeply good feeling about sitting down and like putting a bunch of like pencils in order. And I can't really explain what that is. It's like ASMR for like activity. I don't know, but the basic idea of A Little to the Left is that you are presented with a series of puzzles in the structure of things you need to arrange. So some of the early things are like you're given a bunch of pencils that are all over the screen, and you can arrange them by height order. So you can do like shortest to tallest, but you could also do it in order of like color spectrum, and that would equally get you to the next level. And as you solve these puzzles, they are puzzles, I guess.
Yeah, I think they're puzzles.
Yeah. Um, you get stars, so you can get 1 star for doing the more obvious things, and multiple stars for doing things a little more like dramatically. But you unlock more and more and more complicated things, so you get to like doing an entire drawer with different objects in it, or to a workshop with all sorts of tools, and you really have no idea. And then the cool thing about it is there is actually a story that starts to unfold, and that gets kind of introduced with the cat,
Mm-hmm.
who is a mischievous figure that in the early game will just sort of like swipe at what you're doing and mess things up. But it progresses to the level of you have to use your organizational skills to sort of save the cat from falling to its death as it's trying to catch the moon.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it goes to an interesting place. I really love it as a puzzle game because it's not it allows for people to not get frustrated, if that makes sense.
I like how
If
there's
you
multiple solutions to
Yes,
every puzzle.
there's multiple solutions to every puzzle. If you come up to a puzzle and you solve it in a way that the creators didn't think of, and to your mind that puzzle is solved, you can just say, okay, I'm done, move me to the next puzzle. So you don't have to unlock the next level by doing the thing the game wants you to do.
But
But
they
if
do
you are,
program multiple things into it. So like you
yes,
said, like you can do it by color, you can do it by length, you can do it by width, you could do it by like I don't know, some marking that's on it. You could do it by like the shape of like the how many teeth are in the key, how long is the key,
yeah,
various things you can do to solve it, and the game will recognize it.
exactly. And another thing I really like is the hint system. They do allow you to get a hint, but the hint itself will bring up a sort of like paper that is penciled over, and you
Hmm.
can kind of erase it to see parts and bits, so you don't get the puzzle like solution all at once. So if you don't want to completely ruin it for yourself and you're just stuck on one tiny little thing, you can just kind of erase that and be like, oh, okay, I see where that is. Or you can erase the whole thing and check it out. And there is no judgment based on using hints. There's no reason not to. If like that's if you're stuck, there's no reason to be frustrated in this game, which I really enjoy. You don't. It is a game that is meant to just be relaxing and to make you feel like you're putting order to chaos, and uh, a lovely game for someone who might like have a busy schedule, who doesn't want to spend an hour getting stuck because they didn't put that one thing there.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty bite-sized in terms of like the types of game sessions that you can play because the puzzles
Hmm.
don't last super long, and you can kind of get in and out with it if you want, or you can sit down and play through it all the way if you want. But
Yeah.
it is $15 either way. And as is the next game on the list. Another $15 title is one that you wanted to put on this list pretty adamantly, I might add. You told me you weren't doing this show.
Yeah,
unless we added Once Upon a Jester, which came out November 9th. Talk to me. I saw this on the Indie World presentation that Nintendo put out.
Yes.
But talk to me about what this is. I haven't checked it out yet.
It is ultimately ridiculous and dumb. This is really what it is. It is.
I've been described that way many times.
You are playing as a character named Jester, who just happens to be dressed as a jester, who has a friend called Sock, who is a sock.
I feel like if you had these names, you would try to distance yourself from any association of being like, oh yeah, like if my name was Jester, I would be the least funny person imaginable intentionally, as opposed to unintentionally, which I am right now.
And like Sock is a sock hand puppet, and like obviously not a living creature. So like it starts out with just that level of like, okay, we're just doing this and there's no explanation. And the basic premise of the game is you decide you hear about a contest that royal princess is putting on, and it is a theater troupe contest, and theater troupes have to compete, and when you win you get to go to the palace and you get to do your plays and stuff for a royal audience. So Jester and Sook hear that, and they're like, you know what this means? We can steal the royal diamond.
Of course.
So they're pretending to be actors trying to win this contest so that they can pull off a heist, essentially. And it's you go around to different towns and you put on this ridiculous play, and you gain more plays and the ability to put more plays on as you go. But like the original one is just called My Large Growl or something like that, and you can decide to make the play into a specific genre, and depending on your audience you want to please who's watching. So like if the audience really likes romance, then you make it into a romantic thing and you try to seduce the giant monster and become a giant monster yourself. And you are like during the play, the audience or the player is actually like choosing different options like on the fly, sort of like QuickTime things, so that you get whole different branches. So even if you're putting on the roar and growl play several different times, it's always a little different because of whatever genre you've chosen. And it's just kind of silly. I really like one where I'm a prince, or no, I am a sculptor and I am making a sculpture, and the sculpture is going to be for a king. It's very important. And for the romance option, it turns out that the sculptor is in love with the king. And they have this like, you have to catch the king and like whisper sweet nothings in his ear by hitting like a mini game where like you have to hit a button at the right time, and it's just like the most ridiculous thing. And like it is dumb humor, like it doesn't get any higher elevated than sock being a sock.
Yes.
But a lot of just silly fun.
I will say that this game, when I saw it in the Indie World presentation, was like, oh, okay, I can probably skip that. But your description of it just made me add it to the list of games. This is the worst possible outcome of this episode. I mean, for everybody listening, I'm hoping you're finding all kinds of great ideas of games to check out. If like, especially if you're looking for one right now actively. For me, I have so many games I need to play, and now I've added at least 4 additional ones over the course of this, and we're not even done yet. We still have about 7 left to go, so we're going to get a move on that. But Once Upon a Jester is $15 if that is what you are looking for. This is a game that came out, I believe, earlier this year, but now it is on Switch as of November 9th. That is Rogue Legacy 2. That is, as the name implies, a sequel to Rogue Legacy, which is one of the more well-liked roguelite titles. It's a 2D kind of Metroidvania style side-scrolling action title, I think is the best way to put it. But every time you die, like it's kind of the next generation of your family kind of takes over, and you're going through. So like you're trying to make it as far as you can with the character so you can leave your legacy for the next one. But there's all kinds of power-ups you can get. Each character has different like abilities and like weapons, and it's a really fun time from what I've played. I've admittedly not played a ton of it, but I've gotten a taste of it, and I definitely want to go back and experience it more. I think that like at first I was like, oh, this is pretty easy, and then it got to, oh, this is very hard. It's one of those. So we've talked about a couple of them where it's like it really ratchets up the difficulty pretty quickly there. And I know you haven't had a chance to really play too much of it, but it is one that I think that a lot of people should check out. I know it's one of a lot of people call it one of their favorite games of the year when it came out on PC earlier this year. But now that it's on Switch, I think that's as perfect of a platform as it gets for this title.
100%.
So that's $25. Remember Retro Bowl? Remember that game I talked about earlier?
Yeah, I remember that.
There's another game by that same developer.
What?
That came out this year. November 24th, we got Retro Gold.
What?
So this one, as the name implies, is a soccer game.
We're at 41 now, Brian.
Oh my God, we're still going. We're still chugging along. But no, this was on the list already. So Retro Goal, November 24th, and same concept. You know, you're a manager of a club, and there's a bunch of like real world clubs. You can choose which country you want to participate in. So like Italy, Mexico, any like US, and they have a bunch of cities represented that have actual soccer teams. And they just put out a free update that adds the World Championship mode,
Lovely.
which, you know, is just basically their attempt at giving you a World Cup style experience. The weird thing about both of these games, you don't play any defense. You only play offense, which I think works well in the football game from earlier, Retro Bowl. Retro Goal, it doesn't really, it feels weird that like as soon as you lose control of the ball, like if you don't get it back immediately, it goes to a text-based thing and just says like, this player passed to this player, good pass. And then it's like, they're threatening the attack. And then it's like, they get a shot on the goal. And it's like, your goaltender saved it or goalkeeper saved it. And then suddenly you have the ball back. And it's a little jarring in Retro Goal. I wish there was a way to play defense instead of having it kind of do that, but it's another game that was kind of ported from mobile, so I think that's probably why. But I would have loved to have kept playing and have it be like a seamless experience instead of going to like the text-based defense. Again, I think that works better on a football game because like it's completely different, whereas soccer, it's like the same controls. It's just, all right, well, I don't have the ball, so maybe the shot button is like a slide tackle or something instead, or the pass button is switching to a player instead of, you know, I think there's ways that it could have worked, and I wish they would have done that. But outside of that, like I really enjoy the gameplay, and I like that it's like the same type of career mode where it's like you're going through a series of games and you're trying to manage all the players. And the only downside of that part is, unlike Retro Bowl, you can't edit the player names and everything in Retro Goal, which I wish you could, because it would be cool to edit that and make it so like the real players of those teams were in there, especially in like the World Cup mode, because everybody's paying attention to that right now. It'd be cool to actually like be like, oh, well, this is the team that I'm following in the World Cup, so I want to have their actual roster reflected on there. But no such luck. But
okay, so big question, is this in the $5 club?
It is. Woo! It's $5, and that's another reason why I picked it up. With like pretty much, I watched the trailer and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm picking this up for sure. And I've definitely gotten more than $5 of enjoyment out of it.
Awesome.
You know, soccer is kind of big right now.
Yep.
And in general, in the world. There's another soccer game that I want to kind of call out here. November 29th, so 5 days later, this hit Switch. I talked about it briefly on a past episode. It is Soccer Story. Have you seen this at all?
I have seen it. I have not played it, unfortunately.
Okay, so I've played a decent amount of it. And basically, it's like Golf Story, which came out in 2017. and it's not by the Golf Story developer, as I talked about in the previous episode. And I talked about it fairly recently, so I don't want to give too much time to this. But it's like an RPG that you go around, and like the world revolves around soccer, but soccer's been outlawed. So you're trying to like, the story is centered around like you going around and reforming soccer teams and having like underground soccer tournaments, basically. And then you have to like travel all over the world and like take on like these different challenges that are, of course, all based around soccer. Like early on, like you're trying to like help get somebody on your team, so you're like, hey, I need you to join my team, and they're like, oh, well, I have this job, I have to set up all these trash cans that are knocked over around town. So you agree to do that so that they can join your team, but in order to do that, you can't just walk up to them and set them upright. You have to kick a ball into them to knock them upright.
Obviously.
So it's very much in that, and like it's very silly in terms of like, all right, our goalie is a panda and we have to go find him. He's hibernating in this cave, so let's go find him and have him join our team.
I mean, they look like a soccer ball. And why wouldn't you want that panda?
Exactly. So, and again, like there's very real world parallels with like kind of taking some shots at FIFA, because there's this overworld, like this overlord governmental organization that regulates the only legalized form of soccer. And there's a lot of parallels drawn there. So that came out November 29th, and it costs $20 if you're interested in that. Jill, we've made it to the final month of the year.
We're doing it.
We're going to talk about one of my favorite games of 2021.
Yes.
But it is finally on Switch. It came December 1st, Inscription.
Wah, wah, wah.
So again, this is a game that I talked about a couple of weeks ago on that episode, but let's talk a little bit about why it's one of the best indie titles of the year for Switch owners anyway.
I mean, I would just go with it's one of the best of the year. It is, when it first came out, it was one of those things that kind of caught like wildfire in the Game Informer staff.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember who started it, but
might have been Dan Tack.
It might have been Dan Tack.
He's Mr. Card Game, so...
Yeah, but it was definitely one of those things where it's like, okay, this person that I take seriously is taking this so seriously, I need to check it out. And I'm not a card game person, so at first I was like, oh, this is fun, but it's not for me. But then as you go on, it gets wild. It goes places, and to talk about where it goes ruins anything. But,
let's keep it to like within the cabin, which is the first part of the game. And basically, like, you're playing against this shadowy figure, this like multi-lane card game that I think is closest to like something like Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah.
Where, you know, you attack the enemy, like whatever is in that lane, you put down a card, and then like as the turn ends, all the cards attack. And if you attack and you take out that enemy, then that lane is now open. And unless they play another card there, then it's open for your next turn. And if you attack on an open lane, it attacks basically their hit points directly. And it's, instead of having like a finite level of hit points, it's kind of like a scale that's off on the side. And based on like, all right, I hit you for 5 hit points, that puts 5 rocks on the scale. And if the scale reaches all the way to the bottom, but like there could be some back and forth. So like if they hit you for 5 hit points, that evens the scale out again. So it's not like, all right, 1st to 10 wins. It's like, no, you have to like run away with it basically. And
right. And the background concept of context of all of this is like, you're in a cabin, it's creepy, it's dark, there is a creature in front of you with like glowing eyes, and you're chained to a desk. Like, you don't get the option to walk away. Like, something bad is happening here, and then they're just sort of like, hey, play a card game with me. And that's great. That's a lovely way to start. And if you lose, your life is literally on the line. Like, you don't want to die. And then like there are just some bizarre elements to it. So like you can try to tip the scales the other way by like ripping out one of your own teeth and putting it on the other person's side, or creating weird like as the game progresses in between the actual card game, you walk through a kind of map.
It's almost like a Dungeons and Dragons style campaign.
Exactly, very much so. And you can like pick up items that might help you, have extra cards that you might be able to use in an emergency. You can start making like little totems that help put abilities on different cards. So my favorite was always like, if you sacrifice something, it will come back immediately so that you can use it. So like, yeah, there's a certain element of like, if you kill your cards, it helps you. So and there are cards that speak to you throughout. So there are like
Like the weasel,
cards that
right?
are, yeah, the weasel, and he has a little personality, and like sometimes you have to kill him,
You
and
actually have to
he has
sacrifice
thoughts about
cards.
that.
Yeah, like
And
you sacrifice weaker cards to summon more powerful cards, just
yes,
like Yu-Gi-Oh again. And like every time you sacrifice the weasel, he's like he
fine.
gets really upset about it. Or like if you play a card and he doesn't think that was the right play, he'll like give you crap about it. Be like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
guess you could put that card there, but I mean, what? I'm not going to co-sign it or something like that."
Hmm.
Um,
And then in between playing the game, occasionally you will find that the creature across from you lets you go from your shackles for a bit, and you can explore the cabin, and there are puzzles throughout the cabin, and if you kind of figure them out, then you might be able to find more cards and powerful cards and cards with personalities as well that will help like talk to you about what's happening and how to get to the next step, or how to beat what your opponent, and kind of let you know, unravel the mystery of what's happening here. um, it's such a good game.
yeah, it's again, I mentioned it was one of my favorite games of last year, and I think that it absolutely belongs on this list. It's one of the games that ever since I played it, I was like, this would be perfect for Switch. And the controls, there's a little bit of weird translation in how it works on Switch, but overall, I think it's a terrific port of this game. It runs well. If that sounds up your alley, which I think it should be, even if you're not a big card game person, I think it's an absolutely amazing game. It's $20.
Hmm.
All right,
Well
Jill.
worth it.
We have three more games here. Um, let's
We're
talk
doing
about
it.
this one. It is a game I haven't played yet, but it has kind of caught wildfire on social media in terms of
Yes.
people being excited. It is Chained Echoes.
I've had multiple people reach out to me saying this is a game I need to check out, and I have played the first hour or so of it. It is a very much a kind of retro JRPG sort of game. It starts out, you're in the, like, I love when games do this. You're in the middle of a battle, or before the battle. Like, things are, you're ramping up, you're talking to soldiers, you're getting the plan, like, you're getting introduced to the sort of concept of this world, and it is sort of a um, medieval, but has sort of Gundam like um, things. So you are this ace pilot who's going to go out and win the battle, and things go badly from there. But you play. It is turn based, and you've got, like, most people who've ever played a turn based RPG will recognize the structure, and it but the most interesting system about this battle that changes things from other games I've played is that there is a system where there's a bar above your side of things.
Okay.
And you want to aim to keep in the green section of this bar. And that will, I think it's called, overdrive is the bad one. And this is just like, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it means that your team is working functionally together and working well. It'll give you extra damage. It will mean you take less damage. It takes a little less effort to do your moves. Um, and in order to keep in the green zone, you have to do certain attacks. So even if um, like a poison attack isn't going to hurt the enemy that much, the bar may be asking you to do a poison attack, and so you stay in that range.
Hmm.
Um, and then it's possible, like, the green section is in the middle of the bar, so if you go too hot and you, like, instead of doing poison attacks, you're just doing damage, 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 because that's what you want to do, you might go overboard into red, so you're getting more damage and you're doing less damage, and you can undo that by doing poison moves to get back into green. So it's this really interesting layer
Kind
on
of like a
top of.
balancing act almost.
Yes. So you're not only trying to figure out what's going to hurt the enemy and help you win the battle quickly, but you have to keep an eye on where you are in this bar, because it'll be substantially harder to win if you're not in the green section. Um, yeah, and the story seems like it's very, I mean, it seems very JRPG to me, but it seems very interesting. And the character that I begin playing is not the character that I am currently playing. So you are switching sort of perspectives on things, and you have this world with politics and uh, treaties and intrigues and seeing that from different points of view. So it is a very intriguing game so far.
Yeah, and I will say that it is. I have it downloaded because it is on Game Pass. If
Ooh.
you are a Game Pass subscriber, you can check it out there. Otherwise, if you want it on Switch, it is $25. Jill, we have two more here. This one is one that you wanted to add, so I'm going to let you go ahead. I guess it's pronounced Aka. It's spelled
Yeah.
AKA.
AKA.
Came out December 14th. What is this game?
This is the idea is you are a red panda and you have known war like your whole life. You are this great warrior, and it has made you weary of the world. But now the war is over. You can put down your weapons. You get an invitation from a wartime buddy to go to an island and live in peace. So a lot of the feeling of this game is very about being tranquil, and there are a lot of places in the game to just sit and to contemplate a rippling pond or the clouds going by. So there's a lot of that feeling to it. But the game is a combination of a kind of a life sim, so a farming sim. So you can build crops, you're going around making friends. You don't really have any quests until you come upon them. So it really encourages you to explore. So you could stumble into a cave that has creatures in it that at first seem dangerous, but you realize actually just need your help. So you have to go back and like cut wood in order to make feeding troughs, and then in order to feed them, you have to go back and you have to build. You have to sow your crops and uh, get specific, like cabbages and carrots, which they can eat and bring it back to them. But there's a day night cycle, so it takes a few days for your crops to grow. So while you're waiting for that, you go into the city, and it has this really fun card mini game where they don't really explain the rules, so you're kind of figuring out as you go, but you are trying to give yourself health and attack the other player at the same time, essentially. And then you find that your boat that you got to the island in is broken, so you have to build that back up. And when you do, you can actually go out and find other islands, which is great because you have the ashes of a dead soldier that meant a lot to you, who wanted to have their ashes spread out over a mountain. And it's just like a lot of literally, I played this game. I sat down and I played it for 6 hours.
Holy
Like,
crap.
I was just constantly like, oh, I'll finish as soon as like this crop is done so I can help feed them, or I need to clear the beach of trash, or it's just constant like, oh, I've got things that seem important to do right now. The other part of it is it's absolutely beautiful, but the the art style's a little unfocused, which to me worries me that the vision for the game might have been unfocused. So just a little like warning there. There are some of the game, like the game does have some situations where something weird will happen. Like suddenly I just can't plant in this one particular spot for some reason,
Like a
or like,
glitch?
yeah, some like little technical bugs that never totally ruin the experience, but like pull you out of it a little bit.
Ah, okay.
The art style in cutscenes are like watercolor, whereas in your like speaking dialogue avatar, they're hand drawn. The items themselves, in menu items, look kind of like a flash game, which is a weird
Huh.
aesthetic. And the actual gameplay models are sort of a combination of all these, which majority of those are strikingly beautiful, beautiful like art. But the fact that they're all together is sort of muddling. Um, but it despite its flaws, it is a game. Again, I played it for 6 hours straight, being like, "Oh, I'm going to eventually like I'm just gonna stop as soon as I can." But yeah, beautiful game to go check out.
And it is $13 if you'd like to check it out. So it's on the lower end of the spectrum here. Jill, my brain is fried, but we have reached the final game on our
The
list.
final game.
Unfortunately, Sports Story has not come out yet. We were kind of holding off in hopes that it would be dropped by now. But as of this recording, it is not out. It's still, as of this recording, scheduled to come out in December 2022, but we'll see. But the final game we have on this list is Little Gator Game. And
Yes.
this is a title that I saw you tweet out that you're like, yep, it's a late inclusion into my top 10 games of the year. It came out
100%.
December 14th, so just last week.
It's so sad that it came out so late in the year, because I think earlier would have helped it gain a lot more following. But Little Gator Game, I'm absolutely head over heels with. The quick elevator pitch is a sort of mix between a short hike and Zelda.
Yes.
And Little Gator Game really wears the Zelda inspiration on its sleeve to almost a litigious point.
I love in the beginning though. I think they call it like the Legend of Hero
The
or
Legend
something.
of Hero, yeah.
And then they're like talking about what you need to be like a hero, like in the game of the Legend of Hero, and it's like, oh, you need like a sword, a shield, and a green outfit. And he's like, oh, I'm already green.
I'm already green because I'm an alligator.
Yeah, and so they make a hat, and then like later on, it's like, every good Legend of Hero game has a glider, so you need a glider. And he's like,
Right.
oh, I must not have played those games that have a glider. So it's very, very acknowledging of Zelda without actually saying Zelda.
Yes, and that's part of the humor of it too. Like this game is it's got a lot of humor to it. And one of maybe my favorite moments of humor in gaming this year for me happened when you get your first ability. Um, you are you are in a tutorial to begin with. You have a little island where it kind of teaches you all the mechanics, and you learn how to climb by getting a wristband from a monkey, like you do. And once you climb up to one of the highest points of this early game area, you find a climber who's very serious about climbing, and they're like, I'll show you the like ultimate technique of a climber. And he just throws himself off the side of a cliff and like ragdolls all the way down. And it's the funniest thing I've ever seen. I had to stop to like laugh at this.
It was very, very funny. And I kind of wish that he didn't, because he goes, I'm good, after like laying there motionless for like a good like 3 seconds. I was like, it would have been hilarious. That was just the last we ever saw of him.
Dead. But then if you look at your abilities tab in your menu, you discover that he's taught you the ability to ragdoll. So at any point during the game, from then on, like no matter what you're doing, you could map that to a button, hit that button, and just collapse to the ground. Utterly hilarious. So anytime I'm like up on a mountain, I'm like, I could just fall and watch my little gator, like no fall damage, so no problems. But it's really just hilarious, and that's sort of the level of humor that we're talking about. It takes a lot of like meta like humor hits at gaming in general, because this game in a big part is about gaming and making games and playing games, and venerating just the simple joy of having fun, which is a lot of why this game is so high on my list, because it is just a very joyous celebration of this hobby. And it goes through, and it has a lot of like despite being kind of silly and you're going around and you are basically LARPing Zelda through a large island with a lot of quote unquote NPCs who are in on the game. Um, and you're killing like cardboard enemies and things. There's nothing like there's no actual like violence or anything. Um, but it does touch upon kind of deeper, more thoughtful themes. So like at one point you're talking to someone and having an argument with them that turns into an actual legal proceeding. Um, and you find out that the kind of core behind what they're doing is motivated by the fact that they are terrified that their friends are not going to actually like them and they've been abandoned in the past. And it goes from being this kind of very silly thing to like, oh dang, like I feel for this kid. I like it's kind of a relatable fear of like I hope that the people around me really love me in the way that I think that they do, and I'm not going to be abandoned. And it's just like, dang,
Even
I
the
wasn't expecting that.
even the early like kind of story thread of just trying to like you've grown up from like you and your sister just playing at the playground and like hanging out and talking about this Legend of Hero game in a magazine to
Hmm.
like now she's a little bit older, she's in college and she's working on like a group project and she's like too busy to really play with you anymore. And that got me a little bit too.
Yeah,
Like
and you
there's some
find
heartfelt
out,
moments.
yeah, you find out later in the game that it's sort of you're seeing that problem through little Gator's eyes, and he is still very much childish in the way that he sees the world.
Mm-hmm.
And as he's going through this game, he is growing up a little bit and starting to see how important it is to see other people's perspectives. And we start to sort of understand why the sister might be taking the stance that she is on not playing this game with him, um, in a way that's very, very thoughtful and very like. And it's so interesting to me because it doesn't subvert the silly, fun, childlike enthusiasm for play, and that's still like the idea is still championing that play is important and it's important to keep this childlike side to yourself. But at the same time, it does take a turn of like, but you do need to have some perspective that experience and age sort of give you, and you can't completely let go of that. And so Lil Gator is sort of learning how to be a better, better person, fixing his relationship with his sister, but also being encouraged and encouraging his sister to embrace the joys of life as well.
Absolutely. And I'm loving what I've played of this game so far. If you want to check out Little Gator Game, that is $20. And of course, all of these games that we've covered, around 40 of them over the last 2 hours and change, are all available on Switch. And, there's plenty more that we probably didn't even talk about that
Oh,
are
I'm
worth
sure.
your
I'm
attention.
sure.
But like we had to keep this capped at some point. I mean, last year when we did this, we did under 20. So this is a much more extensive look at the best indie and like lesser known games of the year. And I think that gives a pretty good amount of shine to several smaller games that listeners to the show maybe missed over the course of 2022. But this is already becoming a pretty long episode, so we'll skip the breaks and
Yeah.
just dive right into definitive ranking, which, as people know, is a recurring segment where we take a Nintendo topic and give our personal top 5 lists.
Bum,
Normally,
bum, bum.
we both give one, like the guest gives one, I give one. But since you kind of have your finger on the pulse of the indie community, Jill, I'm just going to step out of your way and ask you to provide your top 5 most anticipated indie games on the horizon. I'll ask you to just keep them kind of short, like each individual entry, just because we are coming up on setting the record for the longest episode of all things Nintendo
Yeah,
ever.
we are.
So yeah,
Record
just
breaking.
start with 5, count it down to 1, give me a sentence or two of each.
Okay. Starting with uh I mean, it's hard to rank these because I'm excited for all of them.
Of
But
course.
I want to start with Spirity, which I am in no way neutral towards because I backed this game before I became a Game Informer. It's now coming to fruition next year. I'm very excited, and I happen to be an NPC in the game. So take my word with a little grain of salt here. But it is a kind of Spirited Away meets Stardew Valley type game where you're a writer, you are heading out to the countryside to, break your writer's block. You drink some magical tea, and you can suddenly see spirits who need appeasing, and you do that by running a bathhouse for the spirits. And I am very excited to see where this goes and to play with it. So, Spirit Tea coming out, I believe it's early next year.
Okay.
Next, I am going to shout out Dordon, which is spelled Dordogne. And it misses a couple letters because it is very French. It is a area in France that the main protagonist grows up as a little girl in visiting her grandmother, and now as an adult she is looking back over those memories. It is a beautiful, beautiful like watercolor aesthetic, and it's about going out and exploring and writing your notebook and just kind of looking over your past now as you have grown, and looking back fondly with that.
That sounds very delightful.
Yes, 100%. Next, I will give a shout out to A Space for the Unbound.
Ooh, intriguing.
And this is a game that seems like it's under the radar for how cool it is, so I really want to shout it out. It's a pixel, kind of 2D side scroller that is a slice of life set in the 90s in Indonesia. And you're kind of going around your high schooler, so you're dealing with your high schooler things, except you have this mysterious book that lets you jump into the minds of other people and sort of manipulate them. So at one point you are trying to get past a guard, so you jump into your book and you play out a little scenario in which you convince the guard to go to sleep and jump back out, and he's asleep so you can get through.
Oh.
Yeah, and then it gets weird.
Oh, then it gets weird. I'm sorry, I thought we were already in the weird territory.
Yeah, if you've played the demo, the ending of the demo is you and a friend who seems like is going to become a romantic interest are crossing a river, and they cannot swim, and they fall and drown as you are hysterically trying to save them to no avail. And as they are falling to their death, things start to go black and weird things start to kind of appear and come from the shadows. And you watch this for a moment and then are instantly sitting in your desk at school with your friend in front of you trying to talk to you, and nothing has happened. Like, none of what you remember has happened. They do not acknowledge anything that you were like just seconds ago saw this person die. And then a whole series of like weird Cthulhu like things show up, and you're like, what's going on? So I am very interested to see where this goes.
All right. Well, yeah, that sounds very mysterious and very. They did a good job of making it so that you want to play more from that demo.
Yeah, 100%.
We have two more now?
Yep. All Number right. 2, I'm going for Gunbrella.
Okay, I've heard of this one, yeah.
So good. It plays like butter. There's literally no like a game more mechanically interesting. You play as a mysterious character who's looking for who has a mysterious objective, and the idea is you have this gun that's also an umbrella, so it allows you to
a gunbrella.
Yes. It allows you to like shoot, but also you can like jump through the air and kind of soar like a weird Mary Poppins sort of thing. It lets you deflect bullets. It has all sorts of like abilities built into it. So the the actual combat is just really satisfying and really engaging. There is a story. I haven't seen much of it, but from what I can tell, the tone is really interesting, and I'm very intrigued to see where it goes.
Well, I'll have to check that out when it comes out. By the way, I think when we did this segment last year, this was when you told me about Little Gator Game.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you did, because it's finally out, as we discussed at the end of the last segment, and it's one of the better games. So I'm excited to hear what your number one is.
Number one, I am very, very excited for this game. It's called Another Crab's Treasure.
Another Crab's Treasure, okay.
It is being made by the studio that made Going Under, which was also a very underrated game, dungeon crawler, the very socially aware premise, but on its surface is just ridiculous, where you're an intern and your business is not doing well. And in that world, if your business goes under, you literally go underground and become like a dungeon and morph into like monsters and stuff. So that's their first game. Their second game similarly seems to be tied into the same universe, because there are hints of the first game in the second game, which is hilarious. But you are playing as a crab, and it is a kind of Dark Souls-esque game.
Okay.
And they promise that the story is sort of equally socially aware. And I'm going to assume it has something to do with the oceans and pollution, because as you play through, you are picking up different shells. You don't have a shell of your own, so you're picking up shells, but instead of them being shells, they're like trash pieces. So you can pick up like aluminum cans and like bottle caps, and each of your shells has its own unique properties, and so like they will break eventually, but how strong they are depends on what you've picked up, and some of them give you like ultimate moves that you can use during battles. And so I'm just super intrigued to see where this goes and how everything kind of ties together. And it's a developer that I already appreciate how they do action.
Mm-hmm.
This is number one on my list of things to watch out for.
All right. Well, I think that we have officially accomplished the mission of giving some shine to some indie games on this episode. And of course,
it's never enough, Brian. I have so many more, but we have to stop.
But as like I indicated at the start of the show, there was nobody better to have on this episode than Miss Jill Grodt.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate you coming on, and this entire episode was one giant eShop Gem of the Week segment, so we're going to skip that this time around. So that means that's an episode. So I really appreciate you coming on, Jill. Like, this is awesome. I'm so happy that you were able to join me after the last time you were on was the last time you were a member of the Game Informer staff. So it's been a minute, and I'm always happy to have you on to talk indie games or even AAA games. If you feel like you've been playing a AAA game that you're really in love with, like, always hit me up, and I'm happy to have you back on whenever you want to come on. So.
And it's always a delightful experience to be on. So 100% have me back on.
Thank you so much again, Jill, and thank you so much to everyone for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. If you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at allthingsnintendo@gameinformer.com or hit me up on Twitter or Instagram at Brian P. Shea. I'm going to put a special request in this time. If you listened to this episode and you heard any new games that you wanted to check out, you downloaded it, and you ended up loving it, I want to hear specifically if this episode helped you find a game that you actually really like. So go ahead and hit me up there, or you can join the Game Informer Community Discord server, which is a perk for subscribing to our Twitch channel, even just for 1 month. Jill, can you go ahead and let the people know where to find you on the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out all of my work at theindieinformer.com. You can actually find a lot of reviews and impressions and thoughts on the games we've talked about today. But if you are on social media, you can check me out on Twitter. I am at Finruin. That's Finruin.
That is our show for this week. Thank you again for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time.